Naruto Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3 came out in the West in 2010 for the PSP and is the first Naruto Shippuden title for the system. The main story mode of this game is the Master Road, in which we have multiple chapters. In total there are 7 chapters, 5 chapters in which we take control of Naruto and 2 chapters in which we play as Sasuke. Each chapter has multiple acts in which the story progresses. Naruto's side of the story retells the events of Naruto Shippuden, starting from the start of Shippuden up until the end of Hidan and Kakuzu arc. After completing the retelling of Naruto's side of the story, we get a small filler line storyline which was created especially for this game. This small filler storyline crosses paths with one of Sasuke's storylines as well. Sasuke's side of things, we get the retelling how the formation Hebi was created, and then the filler storyline is again retold but from the eyes of Sasuke, since in the end of the storyline Naruto and Sasuke both meet up to defeat the enemy. The filler storyline is interesting but padded with a lot of filler activities that just drag the progress of the story. I will talk about that a little bit later. In this filler chapter we get a huge boss fight which is nothing crazy or hard, but is still an interesting addition. The way this story mode works is a bit similar to Heroes 2 story mode. Basically, in each act, Naruto or Sasuke will go through this story timeline, if you can call it that, in which there are multiple squares or events. Red squares with a Konoha logo are story events that basically continue the flow of the storyline. Usually these are presented in a visual novel style, where we have the main characters, images and some text below them. Sadly, this game doesn't have any CGI cutscenes. The most important moments in the story are presented with a still frame from the anime and speech text below them. All of the talking sections are fully voiced, by the way. After a small visual novel scene, we are given one of the 2 types of gameplay options. If the story requires the characters to go from place A to place B in the story, for example the Kazekage rescue arc when Team Kakashi travels from the leaf to the hidden sand, we are able to play this moment. The game turns into a 2D platformer where we have to run from one side of the screen to the other, while in the meantime trying to dodge obstacles, enemies that will attack on sight, traps, and even in the later stages of the story do some puzzles. We are also able to execute jutsus and attack enemies. As well, in this world there are crates and vases which we can destroy in order to get some useful items like speed boosts or some health. This platform mode has 2 types. One, as already mentioned, where you have to go from point A to point B in a given time limit. The second one is when we have to beat up specific amount of enemies in order to finish the event. Other main story event is the regular fights with characters that make sense story-wise. The deeper you get into the storyline, the harder the enemies get. Tactic squares are basically power-ups which we can buy by acquiring ninja points, which we get after completing an event. These bought power-ups can be used before an event by selecting the Use Tactics section. In general, we are able to boost our speed, attack, defensive stats and so on before the fight. Collectible squares are squares in which we can buy images, music and ultimate jutsu finishers, which then can be found in the good old Naruto's house. Ninjutsu squares allow us to buy ninjutsus which then can be used by multiple characters, about that a bit later. Mission squares are similar to the main event squares in which we get either a fighting event or a platforming event. The only difference is that it has no bearing on the story and the rules and the enemies are different each time. While playing through the timeline you will unlock other squares. Each episode and arcs have a progression system where by completing all the events and buying everything you are able to earn the 100% mark. Some story segments are a bit padded out in my opinion, just to increase playtime. I got a bit annoyed when in the filler arcs the gameplay was something along the lines of cutscene, running, random mission square, cutscene and again running. For me this felt a bit repetitive. While playing through the story mode you earn the already mentioned ninja points and unlock new characters along the way. In some story events you'll see an icon with these 2 characters standing beside each other. This means that it is possible to play the story section in co-op mode. Yes, this game puts a heavy emphasis on playing with friends. If the other person has a PSP and the game, they both can do local co-op and play the story mode together. The roster in this game is huge, especially for a PSP title. In total we have 50 playable characters, that is just insane. I assume that the lack of CGI cutscenes is because this game holds a lot of characters. After finishing the story, you will unlock around 80% of the roster. In order to unlock the other half, you will have to do these specific missions. In the last chapter of Naruto's and Sasuke's stories, there are these 3 diverging paths. In order to get all of the characters, you have to finish all of the missions in these paths. By doing so, you will unlock characters like Three Pains, Naruto and Sasuke in school uniforms, Kid Obito, Kakashi and so on. But be warned, these missions are not easy and will make you rage. The conditions for the fights are crazy and usually you'll be in a handicap match doing 1v2 or 1v3 while the enemy is at the highest difficulty level. The easiest way to do this is to pick Kabuto or make sure he has the feather illusion jutsu on him, and once the battle starts, spam the jutsu, and when the enemy is asleep, attack. I'll be honest, in a regular way I wouldn't have gotten these characters. Some characters like Naruto have multiple variations through which we can choose. Another character like that is Sasori in his human form and in his puppet form. Interestingly, we have a regular Kabuto and then possessed Kabuto, but both of these characters have a slot in the roster. Each of the variants has their own jutsus and ultimate jutsus which can be used in battle. The battle mechanics for this game have changed drastically. If for Heroes 2 we had combat similar to Ultimate Ninja 3, then for this title the fighting is more Storm-esque. Now when attacking, the directional buttons don't do different combos. Now the system is similar to Storms, where you initiate the attack with the same string, but the ending of the string changes depending on the D-pad. Executing a combo with the D-pad up launches the enemy, executing it with the D-pad right and left pushes the enemy forwards. Sadly, we are not able to grab our enemies like we could in the previous game. Some characters like a guy can grab the enemy while in the air. A new ninja tool mechanic is added to this game, where each character has two tools. One is the basic kunai shuriken and the other is a special tool. When you press the triangle button, you are in this chakra state where you are able to use the specific tool. Something like in Storm, we have the chakra tools. Each character has a unique tool that can either deal damage or get an attack or defensive boost. As well, sadly, each character can only execute one jutsu, while in the previous game we could use two. The only good thing out of this is that before a match we are able to select a jutsu which we want to use in the battle. As already mentioned, the jutsus can be bought in the main story mode. Some jutsus like Naruto's Rasengan can be channeled and some are just like basic attacks. Each character has an ultimate jutsu which can be executed by pressing triangle twice and pressing the attack button. Once the attack lands, we get this small input minigame, where if we execute the inputs fast enough we get the bonus damage for the ultimate jutsu. After that we see a really well made in-game cutscene where the jutsu is executed. These ultimate jutsus are better than the previous Heroes game. As well, while fighting, if you deal damage or receive high amount of damage, you unlock these chains which allows you to be in awaken mode that gives you new attacks and a damage boost. Some enemies like Daedra transform in a whole different character that is able to manipulate the stage floors. Daedra jumps up on his clay dragon and is able to fly around the stage. He is slow as hell but does some good damage. Itachi is also another example where, in his awakened form, he goes into the infinite Tsukiyomi mode and has this small cone-like field around him, where if an enemy is caught, the enemy becomes in a slow down state, but Itachi's speed stays the same. Basically, the enemy is in a genjutsu. The firing flow feels and is a bit different. There are now stages which have a 3-lane system or a 2-lane system as we had previously, and some have only 1 lane and the lane can be in like 2 floors. The Konoha village is an example where we have only 1 lane but we can fight in 2 floors in the stage. Some stages can also have a drop off point where you can drop your enemies out of the stage. Some stages like Daedra's battlefield are special in the sense that over time these small clay spiders will appear that can explode and deal damage to all characters. Another fun thing this game adds is the ability to fight up to 4 players. Yes, 4 players. These 4 players can be in different teams, making the fight like a free-for-all, or you are able to make teams where you could have like a 2v2, 2v1, 3v1 and so on. The fights then get pretty hectic and crazy. Sometimes when playing, I lost where my character was in the midst of the battle. If you have created a team of characters that make sense story-wise, for example Lee and Guy, you are able to do a combined jutsu. For example, if 2 characters are close together, you'll see this red string connecting them both. Doing a jutsu will trigger the team jutsu. In the Tree of Mettle section, you're able to input a password to unlock images, videos and so on. See wireless battle history and grow this plant. Yes, by playing the game and getting a certain amount of ninja points, you'll make this small pot to grow into a huge tree, where after each milestone you unlock wallpapers. These wallpapers can be saved in your PSP system and then can later be used as a background for the PSP. I think that that's a nice addition, that you can customize your PlayStation Portable by playing this game and getting rewards like images. In the end, I was pretty surprised by this game. This game rocks a huge roster of 50 playable characters that are the biggest roster at the time for a Naruto PSP game. The story mode sadly covers only a small portion of the main storyline, but bounces back with an interesting filler story. In some sections the game felt a bit repetitive, to a point where I had to take a break from it. This game is a huge step up from the previous Heroes game. Have you ever played it? If so, what did you think of the game? Let me know in the comments. If you like Naruto or Naruto game related content, feel free to subscribe. But yeah, that's all from me. I wish you all a nice day/evening. Bye guys.